everyone? My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today, I want to talk about something I honestly can't believe I haven't covered yet. Alpha, beta, and omega roleplay. Is it just a trend in fiction, or a real part of the petplay community and the larger world of BDSM? And what the heck does something called Omegaverse have to do with it? Strap yourselves in and make sure your collar is buckled on nice and snug, because this video is going to be quite the ride. So first of all, if you have not been on FetLife recently, you may not have noticed, but they added a ton of new choices for kink roles and relationship titles. For example, FetLife is the first website I have ever seen that lets you say you were in a queer platonic relationship, which is awesome. I love seeing all these new inclusion efforts for kinky, asexual, and aromantic people. That's not really relevant for today, but I wanted to shoehorn it in somewhere just to mention it. But more relevant for our current video, they also added a new selection of relationship role options, including alpha, beta, sigma, and omega. To be frank, alpha and beta may have been options before and I didn't notice them, but at the very least, now we have the full set to round everything out. Seeing this made me realize that despite many requests over the years, I've actually never talked about alpha, beta, omega relationships before in a kink context. And I should probably do that because these days, they tend to have a little bit of a different association than they used to. Again! And I don't really feel like I can make a video about this in the current year without at least briefly touching on this. So bear with me for a moment, because over the last several years, terms like alpha and beta have gained a new, less pleasant association with them. Now, most of the time when you hear words like these, it isn't about some kind of fanfiction trope or a kink role, but instead about alpha male dating coaches and manosphere influencers. To them, alpha males are strong, good, desirable, manly men who get all the hot chicks, all the 9s and 10s are just for alpha males, and beta males are the weak, emotional, effeminate men who get used by women for their money while they secretly desire or even date alpha males. And that is not what we are talking about today. And as far as I can tell, the kink terms have basically no relationship to the ones used in the manosphere, even if they are the same words. The one connection they do have is that they both kind of come from this one famously debunked wolf study that brought the term alpha into the public awareness. Yes, I know that study. I feel like whenever I say the word alpha in a video, somebody says the debunked study's name and is like, what about this? And it's like, trust me, I know what it is. Just to be totally clear. So, if they're not at all connected, what do kinksters mean when they say things like alpha and beta? So probably the most common place you'll hear those terms is within the pet play community, especially the gay men's puppy play community, or pup play, as you are also likely to hear. And just in case somehow you have stumbled upon this video in my channel and you don't know what puppy play is, it is a form of BDSM roleplay where the person acts out the role of a dog or a puppy. It's basically like imagination play for adults. Sometimes it involves power exchange, sometimes it doesn't, and it can also be done solo or with a partner or even within a large group. And that last way of doing it is often where alpha and beta titles come into things. Because one really important thing to a lot of puppy players is something called a pack dynamic. And terms like alpha and beta just naturally fit in with that. You'll also hear these packs referred to as alpha, beta, omega dynamics or relationships, although that does not really seem to have any intentional relationship with ABO fanfiction, despite the shared name. And we'll talk more about Omegaverse and ABO fanfiction connecting into this a little bit later on in the video. So, how all these roles slot together can be a little confusing. So I'm going to start with the most basic structure, and then we're going to expand from there into more of the nuances. So firstly, we have the alpha, and this is the puppy leader of the pack, and they are expected to help direct and take care of the other puppy members of the group. They are responsible for decision making, and they may also take the lead in educating new members about the group, puppy play, or kink activities more broadly. Most, though not all, alphas are dominant too, which is not surprising given their role as the decision maker and top dog, if you will pardon the pun for a moment. Other alphas who are not strictly dominant may also be service tops or switches who emphasize their place as a caretaker and facilitator for other members of the pack. Submissives with a true heart for service may also step into this role if the pack doesn't otherwise have someone ready to be an alpha, but this often seems to be temporary, at least in my observation. You know how you might have hated being the group leader on projects for school, but you might have taken up the job if no one else would step up because you wanted to make sure the project got done? It's kind of like that. And I'm sure there are packs that are run by submissive alphas 100% of the time in the long term, and we'll talk about how that might be the case in a moment. But for right now, we're focusing on just simple stuff. So next up, we have betas. Betas are typically the middle of the pack role. They're oftentimes verse or switches who are typically submissive to the alpha, but dominant over the omegas. They are also the ones typically able to step up into the alpha role should the position become vacant or if the alpha is unable to fulfill their duties. I would say at minimum what you need to create a pack structure are an alpha and betas. You don't necessarily have to have anyone in an omega role, and you can play it more as a traditional one partner is submissive, one partner is dominant arrangement versus having a more extensive network of different levels of dominance and submission and different ranks and all of that stuff. But omegas are certainly present in a lot of packs. This is the bottom of the ladder position. It is seen as the most submissive and is usually taken up by people who want to be able to just totally submit and they have no interest whatsoever in switching or vying for dominance or anything like that. They know their place and they're happy to be there and they like rolling over and they're happy to just have that be their lot in life. Thank you very much. Although I guess maybe it wouldn't always be without a fight because I'm sure some omegas are brats as well. Omegas can also be quite service-oriented, playing the maid or assistant role to the alpha's head of household or butler role. And actually, in a lot of ways, alpha, beta, omega dynamics closely resemble a Victorian household structure, just with a lot less dusting and more barking, if you can imagine that. And actually, that analogy is a perfect example for discussing how much more complicated these pack dynamics can get. When discussing a Victorian service dynamic, you may choose to only focus on the members of the downstairs household, so the servants. You can have a relationship that is totally contained between a head housekeeper and a scullery maid, without regard for the home's owners who live upstairs. The head housekeeper can be a dominant and the scullery maid can be a submissive. But sometimes, maybe even oftentimes, you want to incorporate those other roles too. You want to have layers of different roles for servants and also the people they're serving as well. And that is where human roles can come into puppy packs. A puppy pack may be solely headed by an alpha pup, but often there is a human leader on the other end of that leash. In that sense, the human owner, master, handler, etc., there's lots of terms for who they are, may be the real dominant authority for all of the pups. The alpha may be under their control, doing their bidding in a sort of enforcement role. They may not be running the show on their own. Or the relationships may be totally separate. The alpha is submissive to the handler when they're together, but at other times with pups, they're the dominant one. The handler in turn may or may not be dominant over those other pups in their alpha's pack, but it depends on how the pack is arranged. Those other pups may have their own other handlers that aren't really associated with the pack itself. So this just adds a whole other layer of potential pack complexity. There also may be additional roles between the beta and omega rank, such as deltas and gammas. This can be useful if you have a particularly large pack and there are power struggles between the various betas. Deltas and gammas are 1 and 2 ranks below the betas, respectively, and become progressively more submissive to more ranks in the pack as you go along. For example, a beta may be a true 50-50 switch, or even a top-leaning or a dom-leaning switch who only is submissive to the alpha or their human handlers. But gammas and deltas may be more submissive, or are bottom-leaning switches who only occasionally have power or authority over any other pack member, typically just the omegas. And to make things more confusing, or more interesting depending on your perspective, these roles are not always set in stone. Some packs may be set up with a very strict hierarchy just from the start, and that's how they're meant to stay. You know, the alphas are always the alpha, the betas are always going to be the betas, and that's just how it is. The other ones are going to be a lot more fluid, with status and rank changing on a more regular basis. Like, did you fail to win at tug too many times in a row? Did you get pinned too many times while wrestling with a lower ranked member of the pack? Well, guess what? Now your beta rank is reduced to gamma rank. Tiny tier maybe for you there. And it's also worth noting that while we've been talking a lot about pups here specifically, not all packs are just for puppies. Packs can also have kittens, cat-dog hybrids, foxes, wolves, hyenas, and even ponies. One of the fun things about kink is that you get to make the rules because it's make-believe. And who says a kitten and a puppy can't be friends in a pack together? I mean, heck, I've even seen a kitten run a whole pack by themselves as an alpha, so really anything you want is probably possible. So that is more or less what an alpha, beta, omega dynamic means in a kink context most of the time. But like, how do packs work? What do they do? How do you join one? And I kind of hate this answer, but it is true. It depends on the pack. Some are more like a loose collection of friends who occasionally hang out together and do puppy stuff together. Others are more like leather families or households, and they're more serious and tend to contain power dynamics between various members, and some other packs are going to be between these 2 points. Packs may go on outings together, like they may go to moshes together, which are pet play-centric play gatherings, or they may go on camping trips together or go to other kink parties. Play is often a really big thing for packs like this, so things like wrestling, rough body play, chasing toys, learning tricks together, and so on. But they can also be serious contributors to the wider community, offering their time and service to others. If you are looking to join a pack, the best thing to do is to look for puppy play events. Moshes, like I mentioned before, are a great place to look. If your community doesn't yet have one of those, look for munches that cater to pet players or animal role players. Same with pet and animal roleplay themed parties. Leather community events are another great option too, since many pups are also in the leather community. Kinky bootblacks often know better than anyone else where certain events are if you get a chance to chat one up. So make sure to talk to a bootblack if you're really not sure where to go, because they oftentimes have the hookup. And once you find some puppy players who have a pack you may want to join, you'll have to ask them how they handle membership. Some are very open-ended and informal. Others are more like chosen family, and it may take more establishing of a relationship before you can actually join. Some are very strict, and they're made up of only romantic and sexual partners, like a large puppy polycule. So you're not really going to be able to easily join one of those unless you're into somebody in the pack. Take your time finding the right group to join, though, and do not rush things. Every pack has its own ethos, and that may or may not always mesh with you, but it's fine if it doesn't. If all else fails, and there's no packs in sight, and no pet play events, and no munches or moshes, consider starting your own. Oftentimes, all it takes is one person saying, "Hey, I want to start a munch for pet players," and suddenly everyone comes out of the woodwork because they each thought that they were the only ones around who were into pet play. Something as simple as a monthly online meetup group or a virtual game night can help you find like-minded folks in your area and get you going in the right direction if you're not ready to commit to running a weekly or monthly munch, because trust me, those are a lot more work than they might otherwise seem to be. But pet play is not the only time people use titles like alpha and beta. Primal play has exploded in popularity over the last few years, and you occasionally see people in that space use these terms as well. While packs can be part of primal play, they are less common than in puppy play, especially in that literal we all play together as one big group at the same time sense. It tends to be more of a loose affiliation, with various combinations of members having their own relationships with each other and different dynamics within all of that. Alphas and betas tend to be dominants and submissives respectively, with betas playing the top submissive role, or confusingly the alpha submissive role, if there is also an omega in the dynamic, which is less common in primal play arrangements in my experience compared to puppy play arrangements. The general themes of leadership, decision-making, and authority are present in this version of alphas as well. I'd say you're slightly more likely to see a 2-alpha relationship in this iteration as well, like a mated or bonded pair. As you may know, alpha wolves are typically actually the pack's breeding pair, and the betas and so on are actually their offspring from previous seasons. So this makes sense if you're trying to do something vaguely, slightly, maybe kind of more accurate for canine animal roleplay alongside your primal play. And honestly, this gets me thinking, has anyone ever done a CGL, primal play, animal roleplay crossover thing before? Because I feel like, especially with this alpha beta thing and like how that actually plays out in real life with biological animals, there is some untapped potential with that particular kink. If you do that or you know someone who does, I am dying to know what that's like. So please tell me in a comment down below. But I think one important thing to think about with all this is why call yourself or look to be an alpha or a beta specifically. Why not just call yourself a dom or a master or a sub like anyone else does? Like, what's so special about it? And to that I have to say, why does anyone choose any title in kink? Why be a daddy or a caretaker or a mommy when a dom can play those same roles? Why call yourself a little or a pet when a submissive can just as easily sleep in a cage or wear a pink collar? It's about what flavor resonates with you. Perhaps you like a more primal, instinctual, animalistic way of doing things compared to the hard structure and rules of a contract. Maybe your play involves a lot of wrestling and fighting and biting, and pet or animal roleplay goes hand in hand with power exchange for you. Maybe you like the idea that you have to earn being the alpha by being the strongest or wisest or most capable in the group, and that you are selected to be the alpha by your packmates rather than waltzing in one day and saying, "I'm a dominant, now where's my submissive?" I mean, hopefully no one really ever does that regardless of title, but you know what I mean, right? There's that struggle, that fight, that selection process, rather than just anointing yourself alpha and getting to do whatever you want. Or maybe you like the idea of being submissive to a dominant human handler, but you want to be in charge of other pets. That's a pretty unique niche to fill, and it might be hard to find outside of the alpha, beta, omega roleplay structure. And finally here, I do want to say as well with all this, just a little word of caution. Especially if you are new to the scene, I recommend being wary of anyone coming in and calling themselves an alpha in your DMs or on a dating app or something. You know, unless you're at a mosh and someone in a full puppy play outfit says it, oftentimes this is a red flag for someone who hasn't realized being a dominant doesn't make you dominant over every new sub or switch who comes along. I was shocked when I was doing the research for this video just how many people had deeply negative experiences with numerous people who called themselves alpha something, since I've only ever seen that title used in the pet play world and I've never known it to ever be a problem. But alas, like Master and Daddy before it, it seems this is going to be one of those words that people who are less than savory like to apply to themselves, thinking it makes them seem more knowledgeable or important or authoritative or something. So I guess just be careful about calling yourself this amongst general BDSM company, because they may be making some unfair assumptions about you too if they don't know anything else about you. Just be careful. The word alpha these days can be quite the loaded term. And then just very briefly here, I do want to touch on Omegaverse, because in my research, as far as I can tell, Omegaverse is this fan fiction thing that became very popular a couple of years ago. There's a really great Lindsay Ellis video about it, and it seems to have originated completely independently of kink on different fan fiction websites and on Tumblr, and it really grew and was like quite popular for a while. And it's hard to talk about it because so many of the terms in it are they're very direct, very naughty words for YouTube, and I'm afraid of getting this video age restricted, so we're just gonna keep it light and not really describe it too much. But there is, I think, some themes within Omegaverse you can take into your kink roleplay if you happen to like Omegaverse and you want it to be something that's in your kink dynamic. So, for example, you can have something like claiming bites, or maybe, roleplay pheromones, or talk about, having somebody who's fated and destined to be with you and like they're meant to be your person. I think it's actually like a really beautiful thing, especially for maybe more monogamous relationships and for power and exchange relationships. This idea of like, my dominant is my fated alpha I'm meant to be with forever. I get the enjoyment of wanting to roleplay with that. It's not really something you're going to see widely represented in the kink community, but it certainly can be there. And I think with these terms being more widely used in vanilla or like, I guess maybe kink adjacent spaces, it kind of has a knock-on effect of it coming up more commonly in the kink community as well. And it certainly has a different flavor to it than maybe primal play does, or even with like especially puppy play stuff or pack dynamics, because it's really like a one-on-one relationship thing, and there's oftentimes a lot of like possessiveness with it. It's oftentimes very much associated with like what fanfiction people call non-con or dub-con, which I don't really love as terms. Like, makes me think of dubstep, honestly. That's why I don't like it. But yeah, Omegaverse can definitely be in there as well. I haven't really seen that like broadly enough in the kink community to talk about how that would work with any kind of authority. But I do want to say, if that is where your heart is, go ahead and follow it. Blaze that trail. I'm excited to see where you take that. And on that note, that's all I really have to say about alpha, beta, and omega relationships. I would love to hear thoughts about this one in a comment down below. If you happen to do this or you're curious about it, let me know your thoughts. How do you want this to work? How does it work for you? What does your pack, your relationship look like? Please let me know if you feel like sharing down below. If you did enjoy this and are ready, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. Link to that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.